Hello, everyone. This is EJ Schultz, news editor at Ad Age, and welcome to the latest Marketer's Brief podcast. In this episode, we continue our monthly series examining purpose marketing with Thomas Kolster, who is the founder and creative director of Copenhagen-based Goodvertising Agency, which advises companies and organizations on how to turn environmental, societal, and health risks into market opportunities. For this episode, we explore how marketers are approaching Pride Month and how LGBTQ plus efforts must change with the times. So let's get started. Hi, Thomas. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, EJ. All good, your side?
Hanging in there. It's now June. Summer is here. And of course, June has long been recognized as Pride Month. And as brands tend to do, they tend to grab onto certain months like this to do a lot of marketing around. We see a lot of mistakes. We see some good things. We see some bad things. But I wanted to take the opportunity with this month's episode to talk a little bit about LGBTQ plus marketing, not just Pride marketing per se, but generally how it's evolved, and get your take on what brands are doing well, what they're not doing well, all that kind of stuff. So let's begin. Just give us your general take on Pride Month, how it's evolved. What's the top advice you would give to a brand about how to approach it in this current time?
I think a lot has changed, quite frankly, in the sense that if we look at it historically, I think in some ways we could thank a lot of advertisers and brands for normalizing this to a large degree. And I think we should actually appreciate that, because I think if we look at the US just in general, it has really changed the conversations and normalized how we look at it. I think the challenge today is probably more what's now, because now people are starting talking about rainbow washing. And so it's becoming a little bit more of a dangerous territory for a lot of brands to go into. And I think one of the things we see now is that it's becoming much less about the advertising and much more about what is actually happening inside these companies. And so the bad news is it's not just a good guy month. It's going to be a year-long effort. But on the other hand, I really think that even though we're not as far as we should be, I do see some exciting progress.
And one of the things that's going on here in the United States is we are seeing a rising number of bills that are kind of going backwards in terms of against what the LGBTQ community wants. You know, a lot of news stories on the Don't Say Gay legislation. And so I wanted to ask you, like, if it's about action rather than just talking for brands, like how activist should brands become when it comes to like lobbying against certain legislation? I mean, we obviously saw Disney caught up in the Florida legislation. What would your advice be to a brand? They tend to try to obviously historically stay away from politics, right? But someone would argue this is more than politics.
Yeah, I think it's an extremely, dangerous territory right now. I mean, if we look back at, brands like Ben and Jerry's that initially were sort of the ones that were quite vocal and advocating for equal rights. But the danger here is also that the brands sort of come out as inauthentic in the sense that, are they really living up to the things that they are advocating for legislation-wise? Is this really just driving another wedge through the population where we have those who believe in it, those who don't? So I think there's a lot of challenges. I think one of the things that I personally really, really love is when you have ads that are not preaching to the converted, that actually do reach out to the communities who might be living in Florida, who might not understand what this whole LGBTQ plus thing is about. So I think the most activist you can probably be is trying to reach out to those who don't agree with you.
Yeah, and that's a great point. If we really want to have change, right, we need to. You could say the same thing about the gun discussion happening right now in the U.S. I mean, there's one thing of preaching to the converted, but there's another thing. If you really want to make change, you've got to do it in a way that's going to resonate with people that might need some help understanding different points of view, right? And the tendency is to be very sometimes abrasive and in a way that almost turns off people that you really are trying to convert to your side, if that makes sense.
Yeah, else we're just sitting there nodding. And I think the same is happening in the political space. I mean, If we want to do something, let's go to Republican states and see what you can do there. I mean, that's where potentially the challenge could be. And I think that calls for a lot of advertising, in fact, and a lot of efforts from brands, that it's just easy to pick the low-hanging fruits. So I think it's about time that if we take this, or if brands take this seriously, they have to reach for those higher branches. And that is really essentially trying to get a lot of us to confront some of the biases that we have.
Okay, so let's start talking a little bit about specifics. You've identified some campaigns for us to talk about. These are not necessarily things that just launched, but things in the last year or so, even further back, that caught your eye in terms of how brands are going about this. One of the campaigns you flagged is from Virgin. It's a campaign called See the World Differently. Can you talk about this one and how you would see this one?
I think this is a sort of typical LGBTQ plus sort of campaign that sort of reminds us of all as sort of like the United Colors of Benetton ad ripoff type thing. I think this is a sort of early stages and probably some of the things that have actually helped us all normalize the LGBTQ plus community. And in that sense, I think Virgin does it in the spirit of what Virgin stands for. So I think in that way, they do get it right. Does it really sort of excite me? Does it bring something really fresh and exciting to the table? I don't think so, but it's nicely executed.
So for those who haven't seen it, it's a classic ad that's just sort of showing either diverse staff, people that work for the airline, and passengers and that kind of stuff, right?
That is the ad.
Okay. So are you saying that this is not like, this is something brands should not do? Should they take it a step further to put some action behind this kind of thing, or is this still okay?
For me, this is that sort of hygiene factor. I mean, if Virgin really wanted to be bold, I think they could do a hell of a lot more, to be honest. I think this is really about moving the needle and taking action, thinking about how we can in fact empower this community. So I think this is sort of maybe like a first step, and probably we could have expected more of Virgin, to be honest.
The next one you flagged, this is several years old actually, but I think it got a lot of attention at the time, from Campbell Soup, which put a gay couple in an ad for soup, two gay dads. At the time, probably drew a lot of headlines. If I think back, I think it was 2015. Why did you flag this one?
I think by the end of the day, a lot of what we are doing in our industry is that we storytellers, and we're trying to create emotional bonds. And I think this is a piece of advertising that I think does that brilliantly. It's clever, and I think it does make you think a little bit. And so the storytelling is just great. And so I wanted to pull that one up. And I know there has been a lot of campaigns since then that are kind of in that same sphere, but I really also think that it does show what advertising can do in terms of normalizing the LGBTQ plus community. And I think it does it really well.
And that one at the time possibly was more breakthrough because it was for a classic American packaged food brand, which if you go back long enough was very stereotypical, like, old school family around the table, probably didn't even broach diversity that much. So this was sort of important in that respect, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of, I kind of feel like it still portrays, that scene we've seen a million times in ads, and it just does it in such a nice, heartwarming way, and sort of still feels like traditional advertising. So I think in that way, it's worth saying, and you can still get out there and do great communication on this topic. But obviously, I think it is, as I said, about time we push the needle forward.
Alcohol brands have a history of has been out front of this, I would argue, earlier than a lot of brands, mostly from liquor. Vodka especially has a long history of, gay friendly marketing. Maybe beer, not so much, but one campaign I wanted you to sort of talk about briefly that is a new one timed with Pride Month, as Miller Lite has come out and published an LGBTQ plus History Month book called Beers and Queer History. They commissioned Dr. Eric Cervini, who was a Pulitzer Prize nominee and celebrated LGBTQ plus historian. It explores the little known stories of 10 iconic queer bars throughout history. So something like this, where does this fit? Like, is this something that's still helpful? Is smart for brand to do something like this, just publishing a book like this?
In some ways, I don't think it's enough, to be honest. I think that could have been done much more. Obviously, it is, hopefully, since I haven't seen the book, but hopefully it is a book that's probably great for that community. It's probably great for putting a lot of these things into historical context. And I think if we look at this whole conversation that's happening right now around cancel culture and some of these things, yes, it's great, but could Miller Lite, in fact, do a hell of a lot more if you think about the possibilities that they have and the influence they have over some of the bars that they're working with, some of the venues that they're working with? I think they could be pushing this a hell of a lot further. And I think this is probably the thing where a lot of people would be like, are they showing enough care?
So we're going to get into some other campaigns that have a little more action behind them. But before we do that, I want to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
Want to increase brand awareness and guarantee units sold for every dollar spent on promotions? Meet the Ibotta Performance Network. The IPN ensures your budgets work harder, reaching over 120 million shoppers nationwide with Ibotta's network of retailers, publishers, and owned properties. With the IPN's pay-for-performance model, advertisers only pay when it leads to a verified unit sold. The Ibotta Performance Network. Promotions will never be the same. Visit ipn.ibotta.com today to learn more.
Okay, and we're back with Thomas Kolster. Thomas, you had noticed something Lego has done. It's called it's a set, and a Lego set called Everything is Awesome Model, which is, well, I'll let you explain what this is and why this caught your eye.
You know what? It's so unfair of me being Danish and then obviously bringing attention to a Lego set. Not fair at all. No, but I think what Lego is about is obviously play. And I think a lot of the time where I get excited about a piece of work and a campaign is that when you launch a new product, you do something for real, something tangible. And I think, being in the LGBTQ plus community, growing up in that community and being able to play with a choice that it's designed for you, designed to celebrate the community, I think that definitely makes a lot of difference. And I think what speaks to the power of this really, really simple idea is that I've even seen it showcased in bars and in clothing shops, etc., where they simply just bought it because they loved it as an icon and as a symbol. So I think this really does show that brands applying their creativity and launching a product can be done in a really clever and impactful way.
So just for those who haven't seen it, can you describe what it is exactly?
Basically, it is a new Lego set that is made in a super diverse rainbow colored, that's rainbow colored, that's diverse. So basically a new sort of playing set that sort of plays homage to the rainbow flag in the community.
And the designer, there's some sort of background on the Lego site that from Matthew Ashton, who explains growing up gay and coming out of the closet and kind of his struggles with finding a toy at that time, and so there's a story behind this too.
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to the powerful idea that sometimes in advertising, how we bring those ideas to lives really do matter. I mean, what are the agencies behind these sort of things? Are they diverse themselves? Are we, are we utilizing a diverse media space, as we spoke about when we're always preaching to the converted? It's much more interesting to run a diversity ad in areas where people don't agree with you. So I think this is a lot of questions that we as an industry can ask ourselves if we are in fact delivering during this month and hopefully the rest of the year.
The next effort, I believe you were judge on a D&D contest for this next one we're going to talk about, right? It was from an industrial designer named Miles Kilburn. It's a product called Breathe, which is a smart chest binder for trans and non-binary people. Maybe I'll hand this over to you if you want to talk about what this product is and what you liked about this whole approach.
Yeah, you're very right. It was something that actually not just judged this year in D&AD, but last year, which was entered into a category called Future Impact. And the really cool thing about this is that it's a young designer who himself struggled with not being able to find a chest binder that was made for the LGBTQ plus community. And so he went there, he made it, he entered into the D&AD program that now helped him, in fact, connect with a big sports retailer. So again, made by someone in the community, and really solving something that truly does matter. So I think this is where I think we as an industry and as brands can really put our ingenuity in coming up with solutions rather than just talking about these things.
And a chest binder, explain what that is for folks who might not know and what the problem this was solving was.
So basically, it is a bra that is made for the LGBTQ plus community. So it's something that's comfortable to wear. And again,
It flattens your chest, right? For people who might be transitioning, right?
exactly. So I think for, and again, I think this is also why for sometimes for brands, it can be a bit difficult to actually engage in this community, and why it's so super important to engage with the community, to reach out to those nonprofits or others, foundations, etc., that work in this community to get these things right, because there's a lot of pitfalls.
This next effort is a fairly simple, straightforward thing, but I'm curious why you flagged this one. It was from Airbnb, which has actually started making people agree to non-discriminatory policies when they sign up to be part of the Airbnb platform, as a host. Can you explain, this would seem kind of like a no-brainer thing, but is it just more brands need to actually do this?
When it came out, and it goes a little while back, when I think actually, in fact, Airbnb I think there was like a legal lawsuit or something that was sort of the little thing before this initiative. But what I really love about it is that they obviously, again, they think about the product, they think about the users and how they can do something about it. So I think this is really living your values, because what you essentially are saying is that if you don't agree with this, you're not part of our Airbnb community. Again, maybe going back to the thing we spoke about with Miller, right? Wouldn't it be great if you can't enter a bar unless you actually really do believe in these values? That is basically the analogy, and I think that is why this idea is so extremely powerful.
So this last group of ads we're going to talk about, you describe as empowering, which maybe takes a step further from action. But this next effort is, again, several years old, but I checked it this morning. It's still active. It's running. It's organized, or it was put together by PFLAG Canada along with the ad agency FCB. And it basically is a website, very easy to use, where you can literally put in any city in the world, plug it in the site, and get a quick take on sort of how LGBTQ friendly this particular city is. Do they legalize gay marriage, or what rules you should know about if you visit this community? So I put in Chicago, where I live, and thankfully came up pretty progressive in this regard. What do you like about this?
I think it's really at the heart of what sort of needs to happen, in the sense that you empower a community, and you also shine a light on where things need to be improved. I mean, there's a sort of human rights campaign equality index that is being updated every year that actually really shows how much work that still needs to be done. I think as a traveler from the LGBTQ plus community, think about how valuable this is, so you don't go into the wrong country. But also, in essence, the bigger picture here is also that I think it asks a lot of questions to brands as well, in terms of what are sort of the countries that we support. If we do products, for example, I know that Target had an issue a while back where they did LGBTQ plus gear during Pride Month, but the stuff was made in China, and China doesn't really have the proudest of LGBTQ plus records. So I think the thing about empowering people is, first of all, to give them the tools that hopefully empowers them, or even better, in fact, you empower people to maybe confront some of their own biases, as we talked about a little bit earlier.
The next effort is another alcohol effort. It's new. It's from Absolute. It's called Out and Open, and they've really grabbed at the issue of gay bars, and they have shared some stats about how there's been a decent amount of gay bars that have closed in the last several years. And so they're really trying to highlight these places as really how valuable they have been traditionally to the gay community. In a part of this program, they're letting individual people in the community tell their stories about how, a particular place that they go to is meaningful for them. And I just want to play a quick clip. In return for anytime anyone listens to one of these recordings, which you can find on their website, they're donating $1 to support this cause. Let's just give a quick listen.
Being at this queer bar and this queer spaces and being accepted into a ballroom community has really helped me understand that I can be myself here. That even though I'm foreign, I'm an immigrant. There are so many other people like me. There are queer, a lot of queer Asian communities out here that we can all find a space and be together.
What's your take on this program? Is this checking all the right boxes, Thomas?
I think what's so interesting about, and which is also the challenge for brands, is in fact that, doing something in the sort of LGBTQ plus space is sort of like chasing a rainbow, right? You'll never catch it. This space is moving fast, and obviously it also, just the fact that you added a little plus after the LGBTQ just is a testament to that. I think Absolute has such a history and legacy of standing up to these issues, and so in some aspects they have the permission to speak, and so in some instances whatever they do, they get it right because they are doing it for the right way. I think people would ever look at Absolute and saying, hey, they just do it for the marketing because we know Absolute for this stuff. And I think that's the real danger of moving into this space, is just yet another cereal brand or yet another beer brand that are like, yeah, let's do something and do it. It's Pride Month. The danger is that people might not see that as genuine. People might not see that as real care. So I like this little effort. I think we've seen, for example, during COVID, we've seen similar efforts from bars, for example, Heineken, that said to bar owners that, we take over the storefront and put some advertising up there, and that's going to help you finance your bar. But I really do like this initiative because it is obviously for the community. It's a super essential meeting place for LGBTQ plus people, and I think they portray it well.
All right, Thomas, I think that's a good one for us to leave it. I want to remind all our listeners, we'll be covering all the campaigns that come out during Pride Month on adage.com. And please stay tuned to our website for any coverage around this issue, not just during the month of June, but all year long. And remind folks also to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite channel. And I want to thank our producer, Lauren Ciardio, and also, of course, thank Thomas Coulter for joining us. And we'll be back next month for another look into the world of purpose marketing, what works, what doesn't work, brand advice, and much, much more. Thanks again, everyone. Catch you next time.